senator from New York is recognized.
I want to thank Senator Patty Murray for bringing us all together today. It's a privilege to be on the floor of the U.S. Senate. It's a privilege to serve in the Senate. And it was a privilege to serve with someone as extraordinary as Senator Dianne Feinstein. People know me as a senator who cares deeply about women's rights, about LGBT equality, about children, family, safety, and anything that I've ever cared about, Dianne was fighting for long before I was ever in public service. When we talk about public servants who leave legacies, and when we talk about the giants on whose shoulders we stand, for me, that's Dianne. She was unlike any senator I met when I first got here in 2009. She had a really incredible combination of elegance, brilliance, stature, certainty, toughness, and kindness. When I first got to the U.S. Senate, I didn't know anything. I was appointed. I hadn't just run a long election where I was telling the constituents of New York why I wanted to serve and what my vision for the state was. I was really, really new. I'd been a House member for 2 years. Dianne asked me to lunch. She said, "How can I help you, Kirsten? What would be most useful for you, for me to do for you?" And I said, "Well, can you just tell me a little bit about what's it like to be a senator for a state of 60 million people? I have a state of 20 million people, so it's a lot, but I'd love to hear, how have you navigated the enormous job that you have?" And she just went through it. She took me step by step, everything that she did to manage her office. She would get a memo every week from her staff about where her legislation sat, what was happening, what were her bipartisan co-sponsors. She had a memo about how many calls her office had received, what the calls were about, what people wanted to talk to her about, what their concerns were. And that was extremely meaningful to me because she said, "I have a copy of this memo and I will give it to you. It's very confidential. It's just for me, for my staff, but perhaps you can use it to model what you need from your staff every week to know if your office is working well, to make sure all the things you need your staff to be doing are happening." It was just a small thing, but it was such a big thing to me at that time in my Senate career. And every step of the way, Dianne has always reached out. She's always said, just as you said, Maggie, "How are you doing? How are those boys of yours? Tell me how your struggle is. I never had to raise children while being a senator. Tell me how that is." She always cared. She always bothered. She always stopped. I've had many dinners with Dianne. We had dinners together with our spouses. She'd take me to her favorite restaurant in Georgetown. She would introduce me to her other favorite women who are public servants. And she always had something meaningful to talk about, a challenge, an issue, a crisis. One of the first dinners, she wanted to talk about how the military was using nuclear weapons in a much more strategic way and changing the entire framework of what nuclear defense meant. She had that conversation with me and the then chairwoman of Armed Services, of one of the key subcommittees in the House. She always asked, "What do you think? How are you going to challenge that problem?" Our most recent meeting was a glass of wine in her hideaway a week ago. We talked about what issues could we work on together. We agreed two of the biggest issues facing her state and my state were homelessness and affordable housing. and we decided we would start working on legislation together. She didn't stop working when she was here just because she had health issues. She never stopped being insightful in the Intelligence Committee, asking the right question at the right time. Dianne's legacy is extraordinary. She's an icon for women's politics, first female mayor of San Francisco, first of the 2 women ever elected to Senate in California. There'll be a lot of speeches about her. And so I'm not going to talk about just her bio. But one of the areas where she really was a role model for me was in LGBTQ rights. She became a champion in the 60s. Sadly, she found Harvey Milk's body after he was assassinated. But she channeled that tragedy into her public service and made sure that while she was mayor of San Francisco, that she made a difference for that community in her city and in her state. During the AIDS epidemic, she helped create the global standard for AIDS health in San Francisco. When she ran for California governor and became the first woman in her state to win a major party's gubernatorial nomination, despite losing that race, she went on to run for Senate to win. And we've seen her champion all those issues for same-sex marriage, reproductive rights. She helped pass the first assault weapons ban to keep our community safe. These are all issues that I've always cared about and built on her record. If she didn't fight for those things, we wouldn't have been able to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We wouldn't have been able to make sure transgender service members can serve still in the U.S. military. Without her hard work, we would not have been able to guarantee marriage equality at the U.S. Supreme Court. This body is less because Dianne's not here. That grace, that courage, that keen intelligence, she will be missed by me, by all our colleagues. I brought the last gift Dianne gave to me. Beautiful pencil drawing, again, just part of her kindness. And I'm wearing Dianne Feinstein's famous red lipstick. I yield the floor.